You're listening to Business English Pod, the business English podcast for professionals on the move.
Welcome back to Business English Pod for the first in a two-part lesson on project management and dealing with subcontractors. In this lesson, we're going to look at how to manage conflict with an external contractor. Before we get started, a quick reminder that a PDF transcript for this lesson, along with hundreds of others, is available on the BEP website. Premium members can also access extra resources for every lesson. To take a free trial, just head over to www.businessenglishpod.com. Very few projects run perfectly smoothly. There are just too many variables involved to expect nothing to go wrong. One of the trickiest variables in any project is the people involved, and some of the trickiest people issues are conflicts with subcontractors or external vendors. Conflict with subcontractors is almost inevitable. Different companies have different goals, priorities, and communication styles. Project managers who know how to handle tension early can prevent escalation and maintain a productive working relationship. And this can keep everyone focused on results instead of resentment. Managing conflicts well requires a very tricky balance. You need to address issues and accountability head-on while remaining diplomatic. You need to set expectations, but steer away from too much blame. And it can be very helpful, as you do this, to reference documents to achieve clarity. In today's dialogue, we'll listen to a telephone conversation featuring a project manager named Celia at a software development company. Her company has outsourced the payment gateway module of a new banking app. Now she's talking to Raj from the subcontractor about their first delivery, which doesn't meet expectations. As you listen to the dialogue, try to answer the following questions. 1. What are the problems that Celia introduces directly near the start of the dialogue? 2. What document does Celia refer to in order to clarify their agreement? 3. At the end of the dialogue, Celia sets some clear expectations. What's the timeline she expects for the actions she mentions?
So it sort of worked out in the end. But back to business. You had some concerns on the latest build?
Yes, quite a few, really. For starters, we're getting inconsistent results from the API. But more than that, the level of encryption doesn't meet specs. It has to be AES 256. Otherwise, it's not going to pass PCI DSS.
Well, that's certainly not good. But to be fair, some of your requirements weren't crystal clear. We were working off what we thought were your priorities.
Okay, but if you have a look at the revised spec from July 5th, it says PCI DSS compliance required. That's not a nice to have.
Ah, right. Yeah, I see that now. Honestly, there were 3 versions of that document. I think some of the language shifted. It's not like we ignored it.
Sure, but that's the version that was signed off on. Section 4.2 lays out exactly what we expected. Our team flagged these as critical back in Sprint 3, too.
I remember the flags, yeah. Still think the scope was a bit fluid, but okay. I'll take the hit on that one.
Honestly, I'm less worried about who missed what and more about how we fix it. We've got a release date coming up fast.
Fair enough. We are certainly committed to getting this right.
Great. So here's what we need. A breakdown of fixes, estimated hours, and be sure to include both static and dynamic application security testing. End of next week latest.
Right. That's a bit of a tall order, but I'll see if I can shift some resources around. I'll need to confirm with my team, though.
Appreciate it. We really want to avoid any more delays. So here's what I'm thinking for future.
Now let's go through the dialogue again and look at the language and techniques Celia uses to manage the conflict with their subcontractor. We begin when Raj shifts away from some small talk to ask about the latest build or version of the payment module they've delivered.
So it sort of worked out in the end. But back to business. You had some concerns on the latest build?
Yes, quite a few, really. For starters, we're getting inconsistent results from the API. But more than that, the level of encryption doesn't meet specs. It has to be AES 256. Otherwise, it's not going to pass PCI DSS.
Celia doesn't hesitate to tell Raj exactly what her concerns are. She tells Raj very directly that the API, which is part of the software, is giving inconsistent results. This means it's not functioning as expected. Another aspect of the build doesn't meet specs or match the specific requirements they've laid out. Dealing with issues very directly like this is smart. If you are not clear that you are concerned or dissatisfied, then you might not get the changes you need. What are some other ways we can introduce issues directly? Let's try some more examples.
We're more than a little concerned about the test results.
Frankly, some deliverables have not been met.
With all the delays, it's clear the timeline doesn't work anymore.
We are finding it difficult to wait so long to get a response on everything.
How does Raj respond to Celia's concerns? Let's listen.
Well, that's certainly not good. But to be fair, some of your requirements weren't crystal clear. We were working off what we thought were your priorities.
Okay, but if you have a look at the revised spec from July 5th, it says PCI DSS compliance required. That's not a nice to have.
According to Raj, the requirements weren't crystal clear or perfectly clear. Of course, if all of your agreements are just spoken, misunderstandings are bound to happen. That's why we write things down in proposals or contracts or agreements. And this is what Celia talks about to get greater clarity. She talks about a very specific document that has details about compliance or specific standards the software has to meet. As she says, these are not nice to have, which is what we call things that we want but are not required. People can't really argue with a written agreement. That's why clarifying issues by referencing documents is a surefire approach. Let's run through some more examples of referencing documents during a conflict with a subcontractor.
The contract states quite clearly that installation will be completed by March 4th.
Just to be clear, your proposal doesn't mention ongoing service and support.
According to the timeline, you should be much further ahead than you are now.
Have a look here at the agreement. It says weekly status updates.
So, does Raj back down when he sees what's written in the specs?
Ah, right. Yeah. I see that now. Honestly, there were 3 versions of that document. I think some of the language shifted. It's not like we ignored it.
Sure, but that's the version that was signed off on. Section 4.2 lays out exactly what we expected. Our team flagged these as critical back in Sprint 3, too.
Clearly, Celia is ready to deal with this issue. She's got all the paperwork to support her arguments, and she has the skills to address accountability diplomatically. We need to be able to hold people to agreements and standards. Celia does this by talking very clearly, but calmly and diplomatically, about the agreement. And she emphasizes these issues as critical or very important. Let's run through some more ways of addressing accountability diplomatically.
I'm hoping we can all commit to improved communication going forward.
I'm sorry, but you seem to be confused about your team's responsibilities.
It looks to me that this is a problem of your own making.
We've got to work out the issues with deliveries because this situation is just not working.
Now let's get back to the dialogue and see how they get past this issue.
I remember the flags, yeah. Still think the scope was a bit fluid, but okay, I'll take the hit on that one.
Honestly, I'm less worried about who missed what and more about how we fix it. We've got a release date coming up fast.
Raj is finally taking responsibility, or as he says, taking the hit. At this point, Celia has held the subcontractor accountable, so now she wants to steer away from too much blame. In a conflict, if you become too focused on blame or telling the other person why they're wrong, it can be tricky to move on. So once you've dealt with the problem, you need to move away from the past and toward the future. Let's try some more ways of steering away from blame and toward the future of a project.
Well, let's move on from that and see how we can get things back on track.
What's most important at this point is improving on response times.
Let's focus less on whose fault this was and more on what we can do differently.
Okay, all these issues aside, can we move on and talk about next steps?
So once you've figured out accountability and moved past blame, what can you do next in a conflict with a subcontractor? Let's find out.
Fair enough. We are certainly committed to getting this right.
Great. So here's what we need: a breakdown of fixes, estimated hours, and be sure to include both static and dynamic application security testing. End of next week latest.
As you can hear, Raj is clearly stating that his team is committed or serious about making the situation better. And from Celia's point of view, that means her efforts have been successful. Now that they've moved past who's at fault, Celia sets some expectations for the future. And she states these expectations in a very clear manner. Notice how she says, "Here's what we need," before listing what she wants from Raj. And she says she wants it at the end of next week latest. This isn't a discussion of the timeline. Rather, it's Celia setting clear and direct expectations to prevent future problems. Let's try some other ways of setting clear expectations when you've come through a conflict with a subcontractor.
What we'd like going forward is a weekly status update.
From here on in, can we agree that changes will be approved in writing?
So, we're going to need a revised timeline by Monday.
To be clear, all future deliverables will have to meet specifications.
Let's finish off by hearing how Raj responds to Celia's expectations.
Right. That's a bit of a tall order, but I'll see if I can shift some resources around. I'll need to confirm with my team, though.
Appreciate it. We really want to avoid any more delays. So here's what I'm thinking for future.
Raj calls Celia's demands a tall order, which means it's a lot to ask for. But as he said earlier, he's committed to getting it right, so he'll do whatever he can to meet these expectations. And that's just what Celia wants, because problems mean delays or changes to the timeline, and project managers hate delays. Now let's practice some of the language we learned in today's lesson. Imagine you are a project manager at a manufacturing company. You're talking with a subcontractor who makes one part for a product. You'll hear a cue from the subcontractor. Then I'll give you a suggestion for what you can say in response. We'll guide you through each step in the practice and provide an example answer for each response. Ready? Let's give it a go.
So, yes, there's some inconsistencies there, but nothing we can't handle.
Start by saying you are more than a little concerned about the test results.
Answer. To be honest, we're more than a little concerned about these test results.
Test results? But we haven't finished running all the tests yet.
Now say according to the timeline, they should be much further ahead.
Answer. Right, and according to the timeline, you should be much further ahead.
Yes, that's true, but we've been really short-staffed, you see.
Say you understand, but you hope everyone can commit to keeping to the timeline going forward.
Answer. Understood, but I'm hoping we can all commit to keeping to the timeline going forward.
Right. Yeah. In that case, I'm sorry we're running behind a bit.
Next, say you want to move on from that and see how you can get things back on track.
Answer. Let's move on from that and see how we can get things back on track.
Of course. For starters, we've brought in 2 people from another team to help.
Finally say that's great, and you want to see the final test results by next Monday.
Answer. That's great, and we'd like to see the final test results by next Monday.
Now let's practice some of the vocabulary we've covered in this lesson. In a moment, you'll hear a series of sentences with a word replaced with a beep. Repeat each sentence, including the missing word. For example, if you hear,
During the meeting, James the drop in sales as a problem.
you can say,
During the meeting, James flagged the drop in sales as a problem.
after each response, we'll provide the correct answer. Let's begin.
Let's make sure the timeline is crystal for everyone involved. Answer. Let's make sure the timeline is crystal clear for everyone involved.
Have you decided on a release for the software? Answer. Have you decided on a release date for the software?
We're not going to finish on time if we have any more. Answer. We're not going to finish on time if we have any more delays.
You need to inspect the product carefully to make sure it meets. Answer: you need to inspect the product carefully to make sure it meets specs.
We've reached the end of this lesson on managing conflict with a subcontractor. We've looked at addressing issues directly, clarifying by referencing documents, and addressing accountability diplomatically. We've also covered how to steer away from blame and set expectations. For more practice, premium members can access the online quizzes and PDF transcripts for this and other lessons on the BEP website. Not a member yet? Then head over to www.businessenglishpod.com and sign up for a free trial to preview some of the extra resources available to members. Thanks for listening, and see you again soon.